Awesome. Thank you so much, Gabby. It's so exciting to hear about our 2024 strategy. Hi, everyone. My name is Susan Farrell, and I'm the head of organizing at Sister District. It is my great pleasure to moderate our first ever Sister District Summit Youth Panel today. We know that political work spans all intersections and generations, and that we are stronger and work most effectively when we can collaborate. So for the next 30 minutes, we're going to hear from three fantastic youth organizers who are blazing trails and fighting for progressive change. And we're going to explore how they feel Sister District can successfully recruit younger organizers to join our ranks and how we can most effectively partner with youth organizations. I'm going to ask a few questions, but then I hope we'll have time for an audience question or two. So please feel free to put your questions for us in the chat. And I would like to start by inviting our panelists to introduce themselves. I believe they're popping up on our screen right now. Fantastic. Hey, everyone. Okay, so would love to start with our panelists introducing themselves. Oliver, could you please start by telling us your name, background, and what political organizations you're involved with?
Sure thing. Thanks, Susan, for having me, and everyone. This is really exciting to be a part of. So my name is Oliver Shirley. I am currently a law student at Columbia University. I'm in my second year. My work with Sister District, I began volunteering in 2017 with the San Francisco group, writing postcards. And then in 2020, began phone banking, had a text bank that I organized with Neil Morgan, former head of organizing. And then I was an organizing fellow and Get Out the Vote fellow in 2021 in Virginia. And I kind of kept coming back to host more and more phone banks. So I've been doing that kind of on and off every fall. And then in spring of 2023, I helped put together an organization called Law School Democrats of America, which is a group dedicated to organizing law school students and getting them involved in the electoral process a bit more than they currently had been.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Oliver. Always great to see you. I would love to turn it over to Yana now to introduce yourself. Oh, I'm so sorry. I cannot hear Yana. Can others?
What about now?
Oh, yep, now we can hear you. Thanks, Yana.
Hi, y'all. My name is Yana Batra. I am recovering from a cold, so please forgive me if I sound a little congested. Praying that this goes away for sure today. I'm an organizer with the Georgia Youth Justice Coalition. It's a statewide youth nonprofit organization in Georgia that I co-founded in my sophomore year of high school. Now I'm a sophomore in college. I'm a mechanical engineering major at Georgia Tech. And I've been organizing with GYGC in a few different capacities. Right now, I serve as our campus mobilization director. So I lead a team of 19 college students organizing on 14 of Georgia's largest campuses. And GYGC in general organizes high school students and college students on a full slate of youth priorities through legislative advocacy, electoral advocacy, training, and then media communications upliftment. Yeah. It's really nice to meet you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Yana, and thank you for being with us through a cold. Wishing you the speediest recovery. That's no fun. Great. And then Aiden, would you like to close it out with our intros?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm also kind of going through a cold right now. Sorry. I'm a third year student here at UC Davis, and I mostly serve as the president of the UC Davis College Democrats. We're the official arm of the Democratic Party at UC Davis. We do a lot of work to organize students to engage with politics, both locally, but also in federal elections going into, U.S. Senate and congressional races across California and to Nevada and even Arizona. We've worked very closely with Sister District, especially with some of their Virginia races, and they've created a great program and infrastructure that we've been able to work with, and I'm looking forward to talking about that. So thanks for having me.
Cool. Well, thank you, Aiden. And again, wishing you a speedy recovery too. Something must be going around across the country, I guess. But so excited to dive in with our first question for this panel. So a big focus for some of our sister district teams has been recruiting younger members and activists to join their ranks. So in your opinion, how do you feel that sister district can attract younger organizers and volunteers? And what would make you, or what has made you interested in working with an organization like sister district? And why don't we go in reverse order? So Aiden, I'll kick it back to you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it kind of in my experience, I've definitely noticed that I think young people tend to be a little bit more skeptical of both of like the Democratic and Republican parties, especially kind of on like the national level. So my kind of strategy in terms of reaching out to younger people, and I think it's something that works pretty well, is really just focusing on the issues that young people really care about, particularly like issues like climate change or reproductive freedom or labor rights, et cetera. And I think Sister District is in a pretty good position in terms of like they can disassociate from like kind of the stuff with the federal elections and focus on the fact that like on these issues that really matter to young people, like local elections and local government is really, really important to, getting a lot of the progressive changes we want to see done. I also think for local elections, it's definitely a lot easier to connect with these local candidates compared to like, for example, like a congressman or a US senator. I think their experiences tend to be a lot more similar in terms of like the issues that each community faces. They're easier to contact. So I definitely would recommend, like, for attracting younger voters, I definitely think, focusing on the issues, focusing on the fact that like local elections are really, really important. And also really just, making sure that young people have the opportunity to connect with these candidates as well. Like, it's one thing to be able to be like, hey, this person's really cool. It's another to be able to meet them. And I think Sister District has a really good infrastructure to be able to, engage with these candidates and have them show up to like fundraisers, to events. And those are always good opportunities to, engage with young people and have them, meet the candidate, get to know them. And then for your existing volunteers, I think it's always good to just make sure that their work is recognized and they're given opportunities to lead and grow and grow in the organization. So that's kind of where I would go for that.
I love that. Thank you, Aiden, for sharing. It's all about, we can really get that direct access to state legislature candidates because the races are smaller, which is awesome. And that relatability to the issues, super cool. So thank you for sharing. Yana, I'd love to hear from you as someone who works in one of our target states in Georgia.
Absolutely. I think that was an incredibly comprehensive and very accurate answer. So I'm hoping that I won't be too repetitive. I would definitely say Georgia is in a very unique position when it comes to the youth vote because of exactly what we were hearing about earlier. Georgia was decided by less than 12,000 votes. And Georgia, compared to all other battleground states in the US, has the highest share of youth voter population relative to any other battleground state. So I think really one very important way to engage young people is to build and message on that idea of youth voter power, right? I think too many young people feel that voting is a really difficult, doesn't work, right? That's sort of the sentiment, right? My voice doesn't count in this way. And so I think there's two ways that we try to counter that. One is to focus local, right? Exactly what Aiden was just speaking to. Instead of focusing on these, national races, which are obviously very important, especially in a battleground state like Georgia, continuing to focus on down ballot races like Sister District is so good at is a great way of making sure that young people understand that our vote share is incredibly important. Georgia in particular has several districts, which are some of the youngest in the country. So something like 30%, 40% of those districts are voters between the age of 18 to 34, which is what's typically described as a youth vote share. And so focusing on these races and focusing on having these candidates engage with the young people in their communities is a really good way for, in turn, those voters and those now energized, engaged, and activated young people to support the work of sister districts, right? To build this national effort of young voters who understand the power of their vote and ways in which they can not only cast a ballot themselves, but also engage other people in building that voter power.
I love that. That really has me fired up. Thank you, Yana. That's so cool. And Oliver, from your perspective, I know you've worked with Sister District a lot. Like, what would you add to this?
Yeah, I would add, in addition to those excellent answers, y'all should go into leadership in political organizing. I would add that I think one of Sister District's greatest strengths is the impact that their efforts make, because these races are ones that are decided by, tens or hundreds of votes. And the State House is where so much important policy gets done, particularly in this political climate. I think really distilling that messaging and that opportunity that can be offered to youth, kind of politically oriented individuals, that's really a really important focus, I think, because I think, as was said before, there's a sense of frustration at the national level in a big way. And I think one of the main selling points of Sister District's approach, and what has kept me coming back over and over and over again, is just the fact that you can give an hour or two and really create a lasting impact that will have ramifications down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. The impact we can create on these state-led races amidst our busy schedules is just like so powerful, which actually leads me perfectly into the next question, which is, I know that you all are so busy. Youth organizers in general are so busy, and leaders in this movement are so busy saving our democracy, saving our planet, making sure the next generation is okay. And so I would be curious to hear from each of you, what would be needed from a sister district team or from sister district in general to make a partnership with a youth organization like yours successful and make it worth your while? And Yana, would you like to start this time?
I'm gonna go run and grab some water, actually. I'll be right back.
Please do. We gotta stay hydrated. That is one of the keys to success here. Aiden, how about you?
Yeah, I'll just kind of talk more like how I've worked with Sister District in the past. I think I've noticed from like a lot of youth organizations that they're very momentum based, that it's kind of slow to, get the ball rolling and to get started. But once like they do get started, they're unstoppable. They keep going. And I think Sister District has a good opportunity to, both partner with the existing organizations that already have the ball rolling, but also specifically the organizations that are just kind of starting out, like some of these smaller like College Dem chapters or Generation Action chapters or so on and so forth, who are, on campuses that have a lot of students, but they're just new and they just don't have the gears of like, momentum to have behind them. And what I mean by that is I think Sister District has an opportunity to collaborate with these organizations, given your guys' like existing infrastructure with, hosting phone banks, being able to connect with these local candidates, hosting like fundraisers across the country and have those candidates like flying in for them. I think it's a good opportunity to get like, the 1 or 2 or 5 members in those chapters to, engage with Sister District and kind of get experience for, how this political organizing works, because they can then take that experience and then turn that into a pitch for, other students that they run into, and hopefully they can get the ball rolling and be able to be more effective, partners and collaborators going into the future. I also think like on the topic of like the infrastructure, I think it's really, really cool. And this is something that Sister District YOLO has helped specifically out with my chapter, is being able to help us book speakers, or, they hosted like fundraisers in our city and we helped like staff the fundraiser, or they had the infrastructure of like setting up the phone banks and so on and so forth. And I think like being able to just like connect with them and immediately have those resources available is really, really helpful and useful for small and big chapters alike. And I think that's a great opportunity that you guys have, is to collaborate with these chapters in that way.
That makes so much sense. Being able to just give an opportunity of like, hey, plug into our phone bank. Hey, we have access to a candidate. Would you like them to speak at your chapter's meeting? That type of thing. That is super helpful to hear. Yana, how would you answer this question?
Yeah, thank you for bearing with me. I would say at GYJC, we're working really hard to build a pipeline of engaged young people who, are already raising their hands to be involved, right? These are young people who are passionate about issues like we've been talking about, climate, reproductive access, among so many others. And to build, expertise and provide training to these folks to cultivate a new cohort of youth organizing leadership. right, where these students can join progressive organizations and also, very importantly, local and state and even federal campaigns with the tools to be effective from day one, right? To bring expertise to these campaigns, to understand how to reach and activate other young people. And I think it would be really incredible for these really impressive and inspiring cohort members to support y'all in the work that you're doing here, right? To be connected with y'all in terms of how can I be a part of this local campaign where reaching out to young people would be incredibly effective? How can I, with the media training that I've gotten, be an effective surrogate, right, in the swing state where it's very important to build trust between young people and the candidates who are running here. And then additionally to, really provide y'all with staffing, with tools, with really, again, that expertise in reaching young voters in terms of designing phone banking scripts, in terms of, providing insight on some of this programming and in ways to actually reach and engage young people. And so I think that sort of arena where, we can help find young people who are really passionate about getting involved from a very young age in sort of the hard work that it takes to do all of this phone banking and this candidate support, I think that would be really tremendous.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that insight. It's super helpful and informative. And Oliver, I'll pass it over to you next.
Yeah, in addition, again, to the excellent things that have already been said, I would add, I think it would help to assume nothing when engaging with younger volunteers and organizing youth groups, because I counted myself as someone who is relatively informed and plugged in undergrad, and I didn't necessarily know who my local state legislator was, or kind of what the off-cycle election schedule looked like. And so the ability to kind of break down just the way Sister District does with candidates, having the one-pagers, or the way that I know the amazing organizing fellows, shout out to the organizing fellows, are able to kind of break down the state legislative kind of picture and what state legislatures do and how it's different than the national party. Just coming into those interactions with kind of planning to start from a blank slate in terms of not making assumptions about what they already know. And then once you can establish kind of what the shared level of knowledge is, kind of running from there, because like Aiden said, it's a really sticky experience. Once you get the opportunity to jump in and make calls and kind of get that feeling. I know myself personally, I'd never phone banked. My partner kind of got me to start, and it's, once you get over that initial threshold, you want to keep coming back. And so that kind of initial contact is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful to hear about. And I think really helpful to remember that leading with assuming nothing, right? And making this a super open and welcoming space. Wonderful. Well, I will ask one or two more questions before we see if there's any questions from the audience. So just here's a logistic question for everyone. How do we get in touch with youth organizations and with young organizers? What is the best way? Is it, tweeting at you? Is it on Facebook? Is it through email? What is the best way to reach out to youth organizers? Would love to know the secrets. Oliver, can I kick it back to you?
Sure. This is where I'm very excited to still be included on the youth panel, although I'm not super active on Twitter or TikTok or any of that. I think, just going back to what our other panelists are doing, I think trying to get in front of as many college students as possible, or getting involved with high school, AP government classes, kind of reaching out to teachers. I know in my high school, I went to public school, the AP government teacher had a, volunteer for a presidential election kind of component. And so there are lots of opportunities to kind of get in front of the younger volunteers and get them, just kind of get them familiar with Sister District and what its mission is.
Yeah, find those channels to get in front of people, because once we can talk about Sister District, I feel like so much of that, the resources, the impact really sells itself. So that's super helpful. Aiden, anything you would contribute to how we can reach out to the youths?
Yeah, I'll just kind of speak on less about reaching the youth and more reaching out to organizations. I think definitely like each college campus, for example, has like a um like a website where it has like all of like the clubs on campus, for example, and that's definitely like a local chapter, like that's definitely a resource that local chapters can, you know, look through and see if there's like a politically engaged org that they can reach out to. I also think like on kind of like a more broader level, there's other organizations that like do these sort of works on campus, like for example, like Grassroots, Dems HQ, or you know, other orgs like that, where you can like, I think there's definitely opportunities to reach out to them, be like, hey, like we're interested in working on this campus. Like, do you guys know anybody there? And from there, I think it's definitely useful to be able to have like at least just one contact on a campus, and they can just go from there. And like it's like, hey, do you know anybody else or any other clubs on campus that would be interested in working on this? And that's definitely a good way to build your network, I would say, is just, you know, looking through the existing infrastructure that's there.
Yeah, establish those connections, right? And then you can have like that foot in the door that can keep growing, definitely. Yana, is there anything you want to add?
Okay, so I'm not going to harp too long on the social media point. What I will say is I think we overemphasize the need to be on TikTok. So good news for everybody here. I don't
Thank
think
God.
it's as important. We are only a little bit, recently getting into the TikTok game. And anyways, what we do that I think is much more important, is actually going in person and reaching students where they're at. And a lot of this is really similar to what Aiden and Oliver just shared. But what's been extremely successful for us, in terms of, reaching college and high school students, is canvassing, right? Is going out, going to a college campus, setting up a table, putting some merch on there, right? Throwing some free ramen on the side so that we can hopefully get some kids a few more meals, on the table. And actually just chatting with people, right? Understanding what their priorities are and ways that they want to take action with it. And I know that can feel more daunting if you are not a college student on a college campus, but adult volunteers who have been with us have also had a really great time, and have had some really inspiring and incredible conversations. Just going up to a public university, maybe chatting with administration beforehand, letting these folks know like, hey, we're going to be here. We're setting up a table. Maybe we've already reached out to the Young Democrats chapter. Maybe we've already reached out to another political organization's chapter. And just, hosting an event on the campus that college students can be at in person. I really can't overstate the importance of that. I know that there was a climate group in Georgia that we worked with to host sort of like a little eco fair that was partially a job fair, partially a let's talk about how Biden made the largest climate investment in history program. And that was extremely successful because we were able to recruit young people and say, here are ways that you can get paid to do this, but also all of you care about climate, right? So come to this event. We'll cater a little bit of, I can't remember what it was. It might have been Taco Bell or something. Meet us where we're at, right? We'll meet you where you're at physically in person and engage on these issues that you really care about and sort of sweeten the deal a little bit. So I really can't overstate, we don't need to be on TikTok. We don't need to be making viral posts on Instagram. We need to be in person on these campuses, meeting these students where they're at. So yeah.
Meet them where they're at. I love that. And Taco Bell doesn't hurt, I would say, is the sub tagline to that. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. It looks like we have a great question in the chat from Paul. For those who don't live in battleground states, what are some of the best ways for young folks who don't live in a state that, is maybe a battleground for 2024, like a Pennsylvania or a Georgia, to have a real impact with sister districts campaigns? And I'm happy to pass it back to Aiden.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was just thinking about that question. And I think definitely, particularly when we were organizing for some of the Virginia, House of Delegates and Senate elections, we definitely try to focus on like two things. Definitely one being solidarity, that you care about, as students, we care about these issues. And while, I mean, California hasn't always have the most gleaming record on every one of these issues, but we definitely have it better than in some other states. So focusing on the solidarity of like, you care about these issues, and like other people don't have it as good as you, and you have an opportunity to help make a difference in those other states in terms of like helping see change in their state and local government. For the people who are less solidarity focused, I always try and focus on like what comes around goes around. Like changes in different states can also inspire national change or change even within your own state. I like to point out that sometimes of like a lot of these like big national bills that we look at that like change the entire momentum of the nation, like they're often look like based on like other pieces of legislation that were in different states. I think also in like state legislatures, like even in California, like we definitely look to other states for like inspiration of like how they're doing things. So while, if you phone bank in Virginia and you're from California, like the result of that election may not personally affect you like immediately, like if you can help inspire change, like that's immediately like great for the people who live in those states, but also it can help like it create the momentum to change things in your own state or even nationally as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Over to you, Oliver.
I was gonna say I would say all of what Aiden was saying about policy, like anything else, is momentum dependent, and you see things happening in another state and it becomes a lot easier for it to happen in your state, and it's or just kind of states all around. I grew up in New York. I was in California for a long time, so on a national picture, it wasn't so much there wasn't so much kind of battleground conversation happening. But what I found also, and for those that have been on phone banks that I've led, this will sound familiar, but I love the idea of amplifying impact, and amplifying the support that the candidates already have in their home state, and the infrastructure that they've already built out. Cleaning up, phone banking lists is one of the most satisfying things for me, because I know it means that somebody who is on the ground knocking on doors is going to have to spend a couple seconds fewer going through that, dead phone number, dead meaning not disconnected. And so the idea of kind of amplifying something that's already happening and kind of lifting that up is really powerful for me, and I found it's been powerful to communicate with others.
That's
And
awesome.
one thing, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, you go, Yana.
Yeah. One thing I'll add to sort of that ripple effect that Oliver and Aiden have just been talking about, where what happens in one state's politics often is mirrored in another, cuts both ways, right? When we're looking at some of the really harmful legislation up in the Georgia legislature right now, that's the same legislation that just got passed in Texas and Mississippi and Florida, right? States that unfortunately aren't as much of a battleground as we would like them to be. But the same legislation that's activating people in Georgia has already, been passed, is already harmfully affecting people in Texas, in Florida, in some of these other states. So one thing that we try and do is make it very easy for people who, might have less of an opportunity to combat this legislation in their own red state to actually come and, support students, support young people, support all Georgia citizens in making a difference in their own state, right? And that's how you figure out what works when you're saying, okay, like how do we convince, maybe 5 Republican legislators in Georgia to say no to this piece of legislation? How can you mirror the strategy back in Texas, in Florida, and use Georgia as a sort of testing ground for the messaging that really, uplifts the power of the people in Georgia, and might also work in Texas and Florida, in these states where literal voting power is being suppressed at a much higher degree. So I think really pulling in that energy of like, we know that this policy is in place here. Can you help us stop it in this other state so that we can figure out how to stop it nationally, so that we can make these protections, not just for Georgia citizens, but also for states where, those protections really aren't present at the moment.
Yeah, that ripple effect that you talk about is so real. And I just, appreciate everyone's contributions here. We're going to close with one last question, which is, of course, relational organizing is a huge part of political work. And we've talked a bit about organizing youth groups and organizations and working with them. But what would you say to folks on the line who are trying to get the younger folks in their lives involved in Sister District and in politics and activism in general? Aiden, do you want to start?
Oh, yeah. I mean, definitely like focusing a lot on like the relational side of things. It's always good to try and make politics, fun for people. No one like there's always kind of there's already an existing barrier to entry to get involved with politics. And I think, if you have a young person in your life who, may be scared of getting involved with politics, it's really important that you try and help break down those barriers with them. Like, obviously not breaking it down entirely for them, because they have to invest a little bit into that to be, wanting to stick around. But I think for young people as well, it can be very intimidating to get involved with politics. So you can find ways to make things interesting and definitely not, super scary and like the world's ending, the world's on fire. Like you can, it doesn't have to be as black and white as that. Also, just trying to focus on like, what are people's individual strengths and weaknesses. If you're a really big introvert and you don't feel comfortable like going to knock doors or making phone calls, like that's okay. Like how about we set you up to go do letter writing, or if you or do text banking, for example, or if you're someone who has like mobility issues, for example, like focus on like more virtual events like phone banking or text banking or so on and so forth. Like making things easier for folks, and finding a way to lean into their existing strengths is always going to be an important way to get people involved and get people into the room.
And what I would add to that is the vibe of kitchen table issues, right? Which I think we often tend to talk about in the context of slightly older voters and not so much young voters. But when you're talking about an electorate that's 18 to 34, there are kitchen table issues, right? We're putting groceries on our table, we're paying utility bills, we're worried about student debt. And so when you're talking to young people, it can often feel overwhelming for a young person to try and get involved, because the sentiment around youth voters tends to be this mindset of they're going to save our country, right? They're going to push back against the polarization, right? They're going to take action on these issues that feel huge, that feel, overwhelming to be a part of. When you can bring that conversation back to when you're talking to your kid, when you're talking to, a student, when you're talking to a young person in your life, bringing it back to the issues that just affect their day to day, right? How can we talk about student loan debt? How can we talk about on a local level? Is there a pothole in your road that you're upset about, right? If we bring it back to these smaller issues that affect folks' everyday lives and give really simple actions for people to be a part of, like Aiden mentioned, making a call, sending an email to a legislator as a constituent can often be extremely powerful, right? Because these are not legislators who often have to feel that direct accountability with their constituents, especially young ones. So bringing it back to really simple issues and using that as a way to sort of escalate folks into taking action in these larger and larger ways, I think is extremely important, right? And Aiden already spoke about, bringing those barriers down. I think that also comes down to the issues and the way we talk about them, right? How do we take an issue like reproductive access, which feels overwhelming to deal with on the national level, right? We have to flip Congress. We have to make sure that we can get a bill on Joe Biden's desk that he can sign off on to protect Roe v. Wade. That's huge. But when we're talking about, a reproductive access in the perspective of, healthcare expansion, when we're talking about removing legislation that takes away money from Planned Parenthood in Georgia, that's something where somebody could call their representative and say, hey, I'm a constituent. I care a lot about this issue. How can we, make this work in a way that benefits me and benefits you, right? How can I, as a young person, take a really, really simple action on this big issue? I think that's the best way to use those relational skills to actually have that direct conversation with people about what's impacting their lives. And you most likely already know that, right? About the young people you care about, where these issues are impacting them. So when you're speaking on those, I think it's much, much easier to get involved and bring young people in than when you're putting a lot of pressure on these huge national issues.
Absolutely.
And so I would say flexibility and creativity, giving folks not just the flexibility in what they do, but in the timing that they do it, what time of day they do it, like something like drafting emails that can be sent later, things that that people can do kind of maybe outside normal phone banking hours, and being creative and thinking about those opportunities for engagement, because it's all about, right, getting folks on the ladder of engagement. You want to get them involved with one thing, get them to say yes to one thing, and then it becomes the threshold to get them to kind of continue to be involved is a lot lower when they're already doing something. And so being creative and thinking about like, what could we use help with that isn't just phone banking or fundraising. And also the thing I heard that is so excellent is also taking big policies and breaking them down into small acts. The idea of, taking these things that can feel overwhelming and giving action items and giving the opportunities, continually just giving the folks in your life real, concrete, positive, enthusiastic, with a smile opportunities to get involved and make a difference, and continuing to do so, just continuing to show up, and knowing that a lot of times, if efforts are rebuffed at the beginning, it's as much a discomfort and embarrassment sometimes of not knowing how to kind of tackle these huge things. And so you keep giving folks the opportunity to kind of take a baby step in the direction of taking a small act, and that leads to a bigger one, and that leads to a bigger one. I think that's something that Sister District already does really well and can continue to kind of be creative about.
Awesome. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel so fired up and excited and inspired by you three. So thank you so much to Yana and Aiden and Oliver, who are doing such incredible work and also took the time to be with us today. So just thank you so much for sharing your expertise and wisdom. We just appreciate it so much. Before we transition to our next thing, I have to give a plug to the Sister District Organizing Fellowship, which has come up on this call. Oliver is an alum of that program. We have other folks on this call who are alums of that program. This is an awesome training program where we bring in new folks who maybe don't have that political experience and teach them the tools that they need to organize, to run phone banks, to do that voter contact of making those calls and that type of thing. And we are currently hiring for our summer cohort of fellows. We're really excited to get that program off the ground and have fellows join us at the end of April, which will perfectly coincide with our candidate rollout. So thank you again so much to our three panelists. And now I am very excited to pass the mic over to Sean Werner and Raven Douglas, who are going to talk about